everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee, and you're here for the second episode of the second round of our matriarchy episodes. So, welcome to episode 2 of Matriarchy 2025. Um, with me today are Bethany Corrie
Hello.
and Gemma Medina. I almost said your full screen name, sorry. Gemma Medina is
Hi.
here. Lizz Nolasco is here.
Hello.
I'm kind of here. I guess we'll see. We'll figure it out. So this is the series where I invite people on to talk about women who have influenced them in their work with young children or with families or their own professional growth. What I love about these series so far, or these episodes so far, is that so many people who aren't like typical early childhood people are being brought into the conversation. And as we're going to see in a minute, when Lizz starts talking, people we absolutely should be more familiar with. Um, but at least I didn't know who they were. So this is going to be fun. Lizz, go ahead and get us started. Tell us who you brought to the party and what you want to talk about them.
Yes, so I would like to direct everyone's attention to Dr. Millie Almy, and I'm going to place heavy emphasis on the doctor because Jean Piaget wrote a foreword in one of her books and continually referred to her as Ms.
Ah,
And I'm going to correct that real hard. So,
perfect.
Bethany, you're muted.
What's her last name again?
Almy, A-L-M-Y.
Bethany
So
thinks she's in class.
she was a professor of psychology at University of California, Berkeley. And she should be better now. And she was referred to as the grande dame of early childhood education. And yet I only know her because my former boss, this is where we get into women you should knowception. You should also know my former boss. She was brilliant. Her name was Dr. Dorothy Stewart. She studied under Millie Almy for her doctorate. And Dr. Millie Almy is, well, first of all, she got a PhD in 1948, which was not especially easy for a woman to do.
Yeah.
And she was, I think there are two aspects of her writing that I would like to focus on. The first is her play advocacy, starting in the 60s and 70s. She wrote a lot about the educator's role, the early childhood practitioner's role in children's play. And she also wrote something that I hadn't seen before, which was the definition of exploration versus play. So exploration being what does it do, and play being what can I do with this? And I thought that was such a powerful idea in terms of.
That's amazing. I'm just reacting because that's
right?
amazing.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just the idea of the way play empowers a child so thoroughly, and the idea that exploration is actually different than play, and you need both of those to coexist. And so she wrote about the use of both of these in classrooms, where in some classrooms that she was writing about, she observed a lot of emphasis on exploration and continual introduction of the novel, but not enough time to play and understand the individual's role of that empowerment, that being able to act with and act upon an object or concept. And then in some where there was not enough novelty, not enough opportunities for new exploration, and how that also stifled the children's growth, and the interplay of those two, which again, just kind of mind-boggling because you hear it and you go, of course, this is absolutely how it works. And
yeah,
nobody's.
I have to rewrite my whole book.
Yeah.
It's not even out yet.
So that was one thing that I think everybody should know and play with. And if I was slightly better prepared, I'd be able to reference the name of her paper. Oh, I still have it up. Look at me. It is called Recent Research on Play, the Perspective of the Teacher. And this was from a long time ago. Let me see if I've got the date here, because recent is a relative term. Okay, sorry, I'm not seeing the date, but if you look that up with Millie Almy, you'll get the paper and get a lot more on her perspective on play and exploration.
Yeah, so this is really annoying because where I got the idea to start this matriarchy thing last year was just me looking at the same white men's names listed in the history sections of the textbooks we're using, in the philosophy, educational philosophy textbooks or whatever. I was like, well, surely there are women in there, right? We've got to get some women into this conversation. And I thought even then, like, well, of course it's going to be more recent then. But this is a woman who got her PhD in 48. And
Mhm.
this article, or at least her play advocacy, started in the 60s and the 70s. And and she's not in any of
Nary a
our
textbook.
books.
Yeah,
None of
nope.
our books.
And then this other piece, can I jump into the other?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is where I celebrate and tear my hair out, because in her 1975 book, The Early Childhood Educator and Emerging Role, I did write that one down. She writes about, she talks about the distinction between nursery school, what we'd call preschool today, and daycare, right? Because there is and was and continues to be that differentiation. But she really looks at it through the lens of class privilege, and she looks at the push down, the academic push down, which was already starting then, and talks about the way she calls it a conservative idea. I think now it would be considered neo-lib, which is
Sure.
its own.
Yeah.
But the conservative idea of starting education earlier because of this idea of, cultural impoverishment, and, those children over there need to be introduced to our culture earlier to succeed, rather than actually bringing everyone together. So, she talks directly about the schools being the model of the quote unquote melting pot, and how that is not what we should strive for. We need to strive for uplifting all people as individuals with their whole selves, their whole backgrounds, not stirring them into the hegemony that is already present. If I can stretch the metaphor a little. Again, 1975.
That is insane, and it's blowing my mind. I can't even handle it. I'm sorry. I'm speechless. I think that all of that's so interesting, and now I've got to go read everything she ever did. But the idea of I want to go back to the idea of the difference between exploration and play. Because I mean, honestly, I joked about it, but I use the words pretty interchangeably throughout the schema book that's coming out this year.
When is it coming out, Heather? What's the date?
I don't know for sure. Pre-order in June, maybe. But okay, so the distinction was that exploring is, tell me the distinction again, please.
So exploration is figuring out what something does, where play is figuring out what I can do with this thing.
Okay.
Or concept or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, I think I just need to think about that more.
I just love the way she fed it into, like, directly into practice, right? The way educators can facilitate and balance the novel, because right, you hear about, as a parent, as an educator, toy rotation and bringing out different things and observing the children for when they're finished with something. Right. But this idea of novelty being necessary to meet out almost, and the way, play can deepen and deepen and deepen on top of that exploration. And she also talks about how playing before fully exploring limits the play as well.
Okay, I'll buy that.
So exploration precedes play.
Right.
He says.
And a lot of the time the adults will take the exploration away from the child, because it's, look at this turtle. It has 4 legs and a tail. It has a shell. The end. Right.
Yeah. So. Or let me show you what you can do with this. When we bring out a new material or introduce something new.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, like, also the length of time that we have. Like, we're rotating our materials and things.
Yeah.
And even if you're still doing themes of the week, like, what if we're not giving enough time to the exploration?
Yeah.
And we're just like, okay, we're done. Like, so maybe they have explored it, but then they haven't gotten to play then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about like art materials was the first thing that it makes me think of, right? Like, you might put out clay and then let the children explore that clay, but it's not until they've had many, many opportunities exploring that clay that they're actually going to play with it in a intentional way of, like, I'm going to make a bird nest or whatever it is that they're doing.
So are we getting into a messy play with a purpose space?
Well, I don't think
I guess
the
it's
end
still the
result is
child
predetermined,
deciding.
though.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's, I don't think she has a prescriptive idea of when something is fully explored, can be
Yeah.
considered fully explored, right? I don't think there's an end goal which makes it that play
Yeah.
with purpose.
It's the child's purpose, at least, not
Mhm.
the adult's purpose.
And it has to go like cyclically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because you explore something, you begin playing with it and exerting your will on it, but then you're going to come back to exploring, because there's going to be, like, as you're learning about whatever you're exploring,
Yeah.
like, you're
I
going
mean,
to keep continuing the cycle.
Yeah. Because you might get new information
Right.
that makes you go back and need to explore it again.
Explore more.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz.
Thank you.
I think you can still rewrite your book. There's still time.
I do feel lost without a writing project. Maybe I should just redo it all.
Send a quick message to your editor.
She's really tired of quick messages.
Second
Some new
edition.
information has come to light.
Second edition. Oh man. All right. What else, Liz? Was there anything else about her that you wanted to get into? So we know, did she work with Piaget, or she just really was into his ideas?
She was interested in validating and retesting his research in the context of the United States. And so they were collegial. And she was very heavily influenced by him, but I don't believe they worked together directly for an extended period.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right, thank you. I'll just go around the horn here. Gemma, who did you bring to the conversation?
So I wanted to talk a little bit about Caroline Pratt, and I know she is sometimes featured in our books and our texts, and she was the inventor of the unit block as we know it.
Yeah.
So I feel like for me, that has had a big influence on my teaching practice. You know, I've always had the blocks be the largest center or the largest space in the classroom. And but I didn't realize there was a lot more to her than just the blocks, right? So she wrote an autobiography when she was in her 80s that I think everyone should read. And it's called I Learn from Children. And so she really, her sort of philosophy was to work alongside children, observe them, work alongside them. And so as my own sort of journey has progressed and I've been in different roles, I feel like I've come back to her book a few different times. So the first one was as the observer of children and working alongside them and giving them very simple materials to work with. She also designed these toys called do-withs. I think they were called do-withs, but they weren't very popular. They didn't really go anywhere, but they were very simple sort of block accessories, we might consider them today. And so she used those. She started teaching when she was 17. She was given a classroom at the age of 17.
Oh
and she then went on to be the founder of a school called City and Country, which is still going in New York City. And it started off with just 6 children. And she decided that she wanted to really have the freedom to do what she wanted to with those children in that space. So that's when she used her unit blocks. She used art materials. She had the do-withs, and then she had just very simple clay, those types of things. But her belief system also centered on involving children in real work and in giving them real experiences. And so I feel like she connects a little bit with Lily and Cats in that way, where it's, you know, children go out and they have an experience together where they go on a field trip and they might watch what's happening at the docks. And then they come back with their own questions about, well, where does the coal come from? Or where does where do the fish, what happens to the fish after they get pulled in? And then that leads to an exploration and sort of like a project, like you might see in, you know, a project approach with Lily and Cats. So later on in my career, as I became more adventurous, and I worked at a more progressive program, so she was definitely a progressive thinker. We did take the children out sort of on field trips, and to have these shared experiences that we could then build from, and with them asking questions and coming to these conclusions on their own, and us working alongside them and not necessarily being that, you know, sage on the stage with the children and telling them about the turtle and his shell and his legs. So yeah, and so as I've sort of continued, that has become a real central theme for me as far as like work. Now I work with teacher educators, right? And students. And so I want my students who are now pre-service teachers, or some of them in-service teachers, to have the experience of going out into the community or into the field and coming back with their questions so that they can give that experience to children. Because I feel like that's been lost a little bit, where, you know, we take kids to the fire station, or we take kids to the, you know, the ocean center here, but not necessarily as a way to spark their curiosity. It's just like something to do. With Caroline Pratt, it was really that is what sparked the work that then the children would go back to the classroom and recreate with the blocks or with the do-withs or whatever materials they had.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of places, if I'm honest, especially when I was a center director, I was kind of a field trip poo-pooer because the ideas were just sort of unimaginative. You know, it was the same field trips. And when we went there, that place had their script, their field trip script and planned experience. And it was usually much more appropriate for older children. So I love this way of thinking about it in the same, it's almost like, even with your students, it's like you're doing the project approach with your students who've gone out and observed and bring back their questions.
Right.
Just what you said. I mean, I'm just sort of repeating you, but modeling, it's kind of the essence of teaching the way we want them to teach children.
Yeah.
That's fun. So what was her time frame? Do you have that handy?
So she was even
she
older.
Yeah.
And I mean, she was born, I think,
Like,
in 1867.
Yeah.
And she
Doing
died
a lot
in
of
1954.
Yeah, doing a lot of her work in like the early 20th century.
Yeah. So I know that there was a lot of concern during the Depression when there was no funding, and so some of the teachers, and at that point they had grown the city and country school to be quite a, you know, well known in its area, and it was attracting like artists. And when the Great Depression hit, they obviously the money sort of started to run out, and the teachers themselves gave up their salaries in order to keep the school going. Yeah.
We've got like the three quietest people ever, and then Heather. What I know this sounds like I'm quizzing you. It's not. I always associate her with unit blocks, but I don't remember like how she came up with it. Do you like what was it that made her think like, oh, we need these blocks that are all the same kinds of shapes?
So I think it came from I think she does talk about it in her book, obviously, which I have not memorized. I think it was something to do with, she was working in like as a construction teacher, or a what do you call it, like a carpentry kind of thing with children. And she was working with a little bit older children and noticing that they wanted to make things. And when they would make things, they would then take them back to their homes, and maybe their homes didn't have enough space for them to keep these objects. And so I think part of it came from that the unit box can be utilized and then put down, you know, like, so you can build something up and then deconstruct it, so that the children didn't feel like they had to take these items home to show their parents, and then parents just didn't have room for them and threw them away. So that was one of the stories that she tells in the book about the creation of the unit blocks. But also she didn't believe in teaching what she called the 3 R's, right? And so, but also understood the importance of mathematical knowledge within the real world. And so this, having the unit blocks be so uniform in their measurements was the way to infuse this mathematical knowledge into like what the children were interested in doing, which was building them. And I mean, it came from like Froebel's gifts, right? Was one of them was blocks, so that it wasn't like a brand new idea, but the standardized unit blocks that we have now were her claim to fame.
I'm hoping Liz is unmuting to ask something. Nope, just leaning forward. I just don't want to monopolize things, but I feel like I was trying to remember because a few years ago, an edited collection of essays came out called Scholarly Snapshots. And it was about different theories of play or different important influential influencers in the field and what they said about play. And it seems like there was a chapter about Caroline Pratt that was like, oh, she is more than just the wooden unit blocks. And uh, but it's just funny to me how many of these folks are described as progressive when what they're talking about is still pretty progressive when we look at daily,
Yeah.
like day in, day out stuff in early childhood programs or schools.
Yeah, so she got rid of desk. And she wasn't just for preschool, right? So her school was actually from ages 3 to 13. I think they have 2-year-olds now, but it was 2 to 13. So it's not just preschool children. So she was doing this kind of method, or this kind of approach with older children, which I think is even more progressive, right? That her belief was that the children themselves are able to construct their own knowledge given very basic materials and given real world experiences.
Yeah. And probably time. I mean, that came up. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. I feel like everybody knows the wooden unit blocks, but I don't know that I think it's easy to say like, oh, blocks are good for math, but it's so much deeper. It can be so much deeper than that to have the space for block play and the variety.
And the amount, and I think that's
Yeah.
something too, a lot of places it's like a check off on the list, right? Okay, we got our block area, we have one classroom set of blocks, we have our dramatic play area, we got some costumes from Lakeshore, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's more like if you have a lot of blocks, if you have a block studio that is, you got a lot of blocks, children are going to spend much more time there and become much more engaged in that deep sort of play.
Right. And when you have enough space, there's not as much accidental knocking down and getting each other's way. And when I was at the preschool at Purdue, which was my most recent kind of direct care thing before I was teaching college, we completely redid our block area, and it completely changed my own interest in blocks and the way children use them. And so I went back to like that Nacy block book that's kind of a classic, and they talk about Caroline Pratt's stuff a lot in there. I always had them, but I didn't always think they were all that deep.
Yeah, and I mean, she also is a big part of her philosophy is also social play. So she really children needed other children. So, and what made me think of that is you saying, when things get knocked down, but primarily they were building together in her. It was like they'd have this experience of going to the docks and seeing the fish or whatever, and then they'd come back and recreate that with the blocks, and each child would have their interpretation and so it was a collaborative block building was what those really were designed for.
Cool.
Yeah, and I have done that with children. So I worked at University of Hawaii at Manoa Children's Center, and in that space we had a lot of space, we had a lot of blocks, and the children we were going out a lot on these walking trips and asking questions, getting information, and coming back and recreating things in the classroom. And they utilized a big stage that we had and recreated this sort of shopping center that we'd gone to. They made a parking lot, they made the buildings like the bank and then there was a bridge. And one of the things that we had seen was that, and we were following the stream was essentially what we were doing. And what they had noticed in where it was built up with these buildings, there was some dead fish underneath the bridge. And so that started them asking why the fish were dead. And it was like the water looked different here and it wasn't as clean. And underneath the bridge, one of the children went and got this little beautiful hand-painted fish and put it underneath the bridge block and said, that was the dead fish that we saw. So really, having that, building on those real world experiences, I think is key. And that social collaborative part too is important.
Yeah. I think, that triggered something and now it's gone.
Curious about the teacher's role in it, because you talk about the reproduction of the of those field trips.
Mhm.
How was that facilitated? Was that in her writing, or I'm curious how you interpreted it?
So I don't recall reading about that, or
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that was. What the teacher, all I know about her belief in the teacher's role is that it's very much side by side with the children, not telling them what to do.
Yeah. You snuck Lily and Katz in there a little bit already. Was there more you wanted to say about Lily and Katz? Because we all love her.
I know we all love her, and I know you've talked about her a lot on this podcast. But yeah, no, I think that the connection, but that I realized later on between the work that Caroline Pratt was doing and what Lily and Katz was doing with her project approach, there's a big overlap, and that's just kind of stood out to me.
Yeah. Full disclosure, a lot of times when I'm trying to think about what I want to record about, I think about what do I wish I had a video about to show my students. So I used one of our Cats ladies videos in a class last 8 weeks, and then at the end of the class they have to pick like one topic from the whole class that they really connected with, and that's what they do their final project on. And usually it feels like, they're taking the easiest topic or, something. But one of my students in the last 8 weeks term picked Lily and Katz as the one thing from the whole semester that stood out to her. And it was very exciting to see.
Yeah.
That means it's your turn, Bethany. Thank you, Gemma.
Yeah.
It is my turn.
Yeah.
So I picked Magda Gerber, who is the founder of Resources for Infant Educators. And I feel like nowadays more people have heard about Magda Gerber and RIE, the short for Resources for Infant Educators. She coined the term educator, and a lot of her work was based on what she learned from Emmy Pickler, who was her children's pediatrician. So I'm going to kind of, I feel like we kind of know about Magda Gerber. Like You're
going to give us a deep cut?
I don't know. Like the basis of RIE is that we trust infants, we give them space, in a safe place to have freedom of movement, and build that relationship with them. So the reason why I picked her is because I found out about Magda Gerber, like, it was probably almost, I don't know, like 20 years ago almost. And it was when I had just gotten out of, like, I knew nothing. Like, I was a 20-year-old, I knew nothing. And I had just left a sort of bizarre job situation. And there was a lot I learned. It was a family childcare environment. And I learned a lot about free play and giving children time and space to explore their ideas. But it was also, we did circle time. My boss wanted me to do a craft with each kid at least once a week. And so when I left that job, I was a nanny, and I was sort of thinking about how I wanted to be a caregiver. Hold on, my son's coming home.
That's the face she makes before the child enters
Come quick.
The Zoom picture.
Come quick. Guys, give me
Francie!
Come say hi to the ladies.
We just need to set up our boys every time we record together on their own little FaceTime.
The very best pod. There he is.
Hello.
Hello.
Is that it? Okay, where's Daddy? No. Sorry.
That's all right.
Did you walk home alone?
Oh my God. Do I need to pause recording?
No.
Okay.
My brother-in-law lives just a couple houses down, so he walked home alone, which he left his dad at the...
Okay.
I probably should text and let them
Free
know that I have
range.
the kid, but I'm not. Yeah,
Free
we're
range
free
kids.
range. We
Yeah.
are. Yep. Um,
Magda Gerber.
Magda Gerber. So I was sort of looking for like the caregiver that I wanted to be moving forward. I had just gotten a job as a nanny. And I went down like the deep, like Waldorf rabbit hole, which I feel like always sort of entrances you for a while. And then
Am I the only one who doesn't get entranced by Waldorf? I think I might be.
I'm
Mellow.
He's a dude. We'll talk about him on another episode.
yeah, no, I'm not entranced like mine was kind of like, what the fuck?
Oh, okay.
But it's that like, because it's so weird. It's so different than I love Waldorf people too. So that's
Sure.
I'm not poo-pooing you.
Yeah.
But anyways, so somewhere deep in there, and I was, trying to figure out the fairies and whatever was going on. But I liked the ideas of like having work for the children. And so anyways, I came upon Magda Gerber and her books, Your Self-Confident Baby and Dear Parents. And it kind of blew my mind. Growing up, like I had been around babies a lot, but I had never seen
They're not talking.
care. They're not talking. I am right now. I've never seen care for infants talked about the way that she did.
Yeah.
And so it kind of changed the trajectory of how I became a caregiver. And
okay.
yeah,
He's got the tiredest face behind you. I mean, I think most listeners have heard, anyone who's been listening for a while has heard my story that my first job was, one of my first jobs in childcare was a center where we had 24 2-year-olds and 6 teachers. And I was so excited and proud of how fast I could do that assembly line, mat on the floor, diapering.
Yeah.
And then sort of accidentally found her at a not her, but her work at a conference somewhere. And literally it felt life-changing. Like immediately it felt life-changing, like not just profession changing, but as part of it, I think just fit an instinct that I already had. And part of it gave a legitimacy to working with infants and toddlers that at the time, I mean, this would have been the early 90s, the time I didn't feel like was there and maybe still isn't there.
Yeah.
I think, go ahead.
It was interesting. I didn't know it, but I was doing rye diaper changes in my first setting, but I was doing it as my passive aggressive way against my boss because she wanted me to whip right through them, and I'm like, but I want to spend time with the kids. And so
passive aggressive rye. I love it.
I know. That's kind of me in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just assigned my students the documentary Respectfully Yours, I think it's called, that is Magda Gerber, talking about her philosophy and her beliefs. And one of the pieces that my students struggle with is when she says, you don't want to change a crying baby, right? You don't want to stop them from having that feeling. You need to allow them to have that feeling, because I think for many people, the instinct is like, oh, it's okay, let's down, let's stop the crying, because that's distressful for the adult. I mean, the child is going through something, but we need to allow those feelings. But that can be really challenging for, especially for new teachers in the field, to be like, well, my job is to help the children feel better, and my job is to help, make sure
to stop the crying.
To stop the crying.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's so much that needs skillful interpretation of her work too, right? I think there's so much in respecting the child that is so incredibly valuable. And I think she's written so much about the role of the adult And I feel like that's somehow not talked about as much. I mean, obviously, how the adult responds to the child has been clearly written about, but some of this idea of the freedom of the child overtaking almost the role of the adult, I think has been really misinterpreted a lot. And I think as her work has come into like the broader cultural zeitgeist, I think there's a lot of context and nuance that's missing.
Like what?
Like the idea
You got
of
something to say, just say it, Liz.
just supporting children through, right? Allowing them to have the emotion without making it worse.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it does get lumped in, I think, with the gentle parenting misunderstandings and that when we say respect the child and involve the child and be respectful in how you handle the child, it doesn't mean that we can't do anything that's firm or assertive or a boundary. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah, and then on the flip side of her idea of, when a child is fed and clean and like let them explore. I think also sometimes folks need more parameters around that. Again, broader cultural conversation, not a specific, but I think there's a lot of nuance there where benign neglect is important and good, and then there's just neglect, and you can't call that right.
Magda said, I can't touch that baby till they pee.
Yes, exactly. Right. It's just that the building of strong relationships and adult guidance, I think, is something that everybody needs to talk about more. And
yeah,
Magda maybe needs some louder voices advocating for on her behalf.
Yeah, I think like to the point of that it gets sort of misconstrued. Like I feel like I see this happen with every parenting fad that comes up. Because it happened like with attachment parenting. And then I feel like in the last 10 years, it's come up with Rye a lot and now gentle parenting is the new key term. And like, people complain, oh, now, oh, these attachment parents, oh, these Rye parents, oh, these, and it comes down to like parents find something that might spark a connection in them. And, that, they read Sears and they want to be an attachment parent, or they want to be a Rye parent or whatever.
Yeah.
But then when you come down to the reality, especially when you have a 2-year-old who begins exerting their will, then it just turns into permissive parenting.
Yeah.
Or
even just hesitant. And I don't mean you can't pause before you decide how you want to respond, but that when you clearly put it in the child's court to make this decision for me, I'm the grown up, but I'm not sure where my respectful response is yet, and you're the baby, but you decide for me what I should do now. I think there's discomfort in there too, and that's not what Magda Gerber was writing and talking about either. We talked about her just this afternoon in class. We were talking about advocacy and professionalism in this. It's the capstone right before they are graduating. So these are all students who've been through, everything we've got. But we read, in February, Exchange Press sent out an email with like an open letter to educators about the childcare crisis, which was written by Kisa Marks, who we love. And so we read that in class today, like just section by section. We read it together and responded and reacted and talked about it a lot. And there's a part where Kisa's writing about, she was specifically talking about during COVID, but that's when it really hit her that the care tasks had not become caring, had become not caring. They were just things to check off the list or move through. And so they really all connected with that. So COVID or not, I feel like that some days. I know I've changed a bunch of diapers, but I don't remember an interaction during during that. Or I know I just helped 10 kids wash their hands, but I didn't look at any of them in the face, that kind of stuff. And so we were just talking about just the idea of, before you change a diaper, getting on their level and telling them what you're about to do, even if it's a 6-month-old baby who's not going to say, "Oh, okay, that sounds great." Um, just that getting on their level, um, being mindful of how your touch is going with kids, um, slowing down during the hand washing, even though lunch is on the table. And so Magda Gerber just came into that conversation too. And I feel like if nothing else, it's just an invitation to us to slow down,
Yeah.
which is gonna impact our well-being as we go through these days, but also impact the children. And I think that's respect, right? I think that's
I guess everyone can't live with a 4-year-old who tells them, "Why do you always tell me things 2 times?" Called out this weekend.
he wants you to tell him thrice.
He was quite clear that once was plenty.
Oh, once was enough.
I should slow my roll.
Oh my gosh. Oh man, I need a kid to hang out with stat. Send them all over. Bethany, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about with Magda Gerber?
I did have one, you had sort of reminded me of it, that piece of like having the conversation with the child while you're doing the caregiving task.
Mhm.
I have a new 4-month-old that just started last week in my care, and super sweet, perfect baby, has never done anything wrong. And I made the mistake one day. I just picked her up out of her seat,
Mm.
and she did like the little baby startle. But it really made, and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry," like I forgot to tell you I was coming. And she's from a really quiet household, so like
Oh.
being at the children's bureau is a whole new experience for her. Um, but then it's given me time to pause, and I had been doing it before, but that one experience has pointed out all the times where I do say like, "I'm going to pick you up," and I kind of like put my hands under her shoulders, and she
Mhm.
does this little shoulder
Shruggy.
like, "Hey, you're coming." and so it's, when you're in that hurry, like you don't notice the conversation that you're
Mhm.
having with even a small infant.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And her work was with infants and toddlers. I don't think that her methods or ideas are limited to infants and toddlers. I think it's an example of a really good thing that could be pushed up instead
Yeah,
of things constantly being pushed down on us.
it
Yeah.
does. It
Okay.
does work with big kids.
Yeah. Um, does I don't want to start a whole, does primary caregiving come from Magda Gerber, or is that we just no, that's PITC maybe is where I'm thinking of the
Well, and
program for infants and toddlers.
so with Emmy Pickler, the nurses in the orphanages
Right.
sign, I don't remember exactly how long the contracts were, but they would sign the long contracts to stay with their group
Oh.
of children,
Hmm.
for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And that I know, like in Rye, like childcare centers, that continuity of care is.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's written into licensing in Indiana that you do continuity of care, but they give you like 7 million different ways to say that you're doing it that aren't really hitting that.
Yeah.
But it's hard to do in childcare. It's expensive to do, and it's
Yeah.
there's staff resistance sometimes. It's a good
That's
example
why
of
family childcare is great.
I know, right? I was just gonna say it's another example of why we need to quit being so dismissive of family childcare, because it can work some of those things that licensing or budgets or staffing makes it really hard for a center to do. Okay. Any last thoughts about any of your people or any of each other's people? All right. Well, we'll let Bethany figure out where her husband is then. Why her son came home without his dad. All right. Well, thank you all. This was so fun. I've got a long list of things. Each one of you mentioned something that I either have to buy or go look up now. So just what I look for in a nerd episode. So thank you for being here. And thanks everybody for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Francie.